Cha life force was fading rapidly, and it didn't look good. Jinu's face hardened as the gravity of the situation hit him. He realized that he had taken too long to defeat the Ant King. Now he had to find a healer, and fast. His mind raced through the options. Jinu thought about his shadow exchange skill, but there were limitations. There was still some time left before he could use the skill again, and he wasn't sure if he could teleport with another person. He hadn't tested it yet. Flying out on Kaisel's back crossed his mind, but he knew that Heian would likely die mid-flight. Desperation crept in as he considered whether there was a healer from the Blade Guild still alive. There had to be a way to save her. Jinu suddenly flinched as another idea formed. He quickly turned to the cameraman nearby. "Excuse me, can you turn off the camera for a second?" Jinu asked, his voice firm. The cameraman, puzzled by the sudden request, hesitated. "Pardon?" he asked, unsure of why Jinu wanted the camera off. Jinu's tone grew more urgent. "Hurry up, if you don't shut it off, I'm going to smash it to pieces." The seriousness in his voice left no room for argument. The cameraman quickly complied, shutting off the camera while wondering why Jinu had made such a request. His thoughts raced as he tried to figure out what was happening. Jinu then turned his attention back to his shadows, issuing a direct command. "Listen up, shadows, go find Min Byung-yu's body." The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Baek's eyes widened in shock as he realized what Jinu was planning. The shadows carried the decapitated body to Jinu, who inspected the black smoke emanating from the corpse. This indicated that it might be possible to extract a shadow from Byung-yu. Jinu's thoughts were focused and determined as he considered his next move. Jinu commanded the extraction, saying, "Arise." However, the result was not what he expected. The system notification popped up. Shadow extraction has failed. Jinu was both puzzled and worried. The failure was unexpected given the current level of his extraction skill, which should have been high enough for a simple extraction like this. Jinu's thoughts raced as he tried to understand why it wasn't working. He considered that perhaps Min Byung-yu felt strongly opposed to becoming a shadow soldier, seeing it as immoral to turn a human being into one. But Jinu knew he had to save the person who was still alive, Cha Hae-in. He cleansed his mind of any useless thoughts and spoke with conviction. Once again, he commanded, "Arise!" This time, the transformation began. A frigid wind swept around them as a deep sound, a cross between a yell and a scream, echoed heavily through the cave. Baek's voice echoed through the cavern as he called out to Jinu, his emotions running high. His hands trembled as he grabbed Jinu's shoulders, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The sight before him was almost too much to comprehend. He could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Could Jinu actually command the dead? As Baek watched in a mix of horror, a black hand shot out from the shadow of Min Byung-yu, grasping the ground as if it were desperate not to return to the darkness. Slowly, the hand pulled a figure out, a soldier wearing black armor, fully corporeal and filled with mana. The hunters around them were speechless, their eyes locked on the new minion that Jinu had summoned. Jinu's power was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Jong-in wondered aloud if Jinu could truly harness the powers of the dead. Dong-wook couldn't help but acknowledge that Jinu was no ordinary summoner. As soon as Byung-yu's shadow was extracted, it began to move on its own, walking toward Cha Hae-in without any command from Jinu. The shadow, now taking on the form of the healer it once was, began to cast healing magic on Hae-in. The warm light emanating from the shadow soldier's hands bathed Hae-in in a gentle glow, and her complexion started to return to normal. Baek watched, his eyes numb with emotion. Was this really Byung-yu healing her? He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Jinu, sensing Baek's confusion and turmoil, spoke with a calm and steady voice. He explained that he could tell what kind of person Min Byung-yu had been. Without needing any orders, Byung-yu's shadow had immediately begun healing Cha Hae-in. Jinu acknowledged that this was because Byung-yu had a warm heart, even in death. Baek clenched his fists and closed his eyes, trying to contain the emotions swirling inside him. He knew that the figure before him was no longer the Byung-yu he once knew. Jinu agreed, understanding the pain in Baek's heart. The cameraman, who had been watching from a distance, was equally stunned. He realized why Jinu had asked him to turn off the camera. The public could never know about this ability to summon the dead. Jong-in, meanwhile, reflected on Jinu's growing power. The more battles Jinu fought, the more powerful he became. It was a frightening ability, one that Jong-in couldn't help but respect and fear. Baek, trying to reconcile his feelings, spoke to Jinu once more. He acknowledged that Jinu would likely face many more battles in the future, and Byung-yu's abilities would be invaluable. However, Baek also knew that Byung-yu had hated violence, and he pleaded with Jinu not to force him to fight on the battlefield again. Jinu listened to Baek's heartfelt request. With a gentle motion, Jinu removed Baek's hand from his shoulder. This was the second time when Baek grabbed Jinu's shoulders, but this time, Baek wasn't giving him an order, but making a genuine plea from the heart. With a light smile on his face, Jinu made his decision. He then turned his attention back to the shadow of Byung-yu. He commanded the termination of the extraction. Byung-yu's shadow slowly faded away, released from its bond. Jinu knew that Byung-yu had given his life to fight against the magic beasts, and keeping him as a soldier didn't feel right. It wasn't the way to honor a fallen comrade. Baek's eyes were filled with gratitude as he whispered his thanks. The helicopter circled above the island, its rotors slicing through the air as it searched for the hunters on the ground. The co-pilot spotted them below and alerted the crew. The hunters, Jonggin, Taegyu, Dongwook, and the cameraman began making their way toward the chopper. Dongwook carried the unconscious Cha Hae-in, while Baek held the lifeless body of Min Byung-gyu. The helicopter carefully descended, landing near the group as they boarded one by one. However, Jinu and Baek remained outside, not yet ready to leave. Jinu informed Baek that he intended to stay behind. He had unfinished business to take care of. Baek understood, acknowledging that the raid was far from over. Jinu planned to clear the remaining ants and ensure the path was safe for everyone. With a determined grin, Jinu summoned Kaizel, his dragon mount. He assured Baek that they would meet again and then took to the skies. Jinu flew over the island, hunting down any ants that had escaped his shadow soldiers. His mission was to exterminate every last one of them, ensuring that the island was finally free of the deadly creatures. Meanwhile, on a ship sailing across the ocean, Japanese hunter Hoshino Minoru was visibly shaken, recounting the terror of the battle. He described the monster that had killed their leader, Mr. Goto, and how it seemed impossible to defeat. The fear in his voice was evident as he declared that no hunter in the world could slay such a beast. Sugimoto, the vice guild master of Blade Guild on board, tried to calm him down. He informed Minoru that the Jeju Island raid had already ended, and that the beast had been defeated. Minoru was in disbelief, unable to comprehend that such a powerful creature could be vanquished. Sugimoto recalled a conversation he had with Mr. Goto before the raid, where they discussed a skilled hunter in South Korea named Sung Jinu. Despite Goto's confidence, Sugimoto had a feeling that Jinu might be stronger than they had initially thought. As the ship continued its journey, one of the crew members reported that the ants on the island were dispersing. Sugimoto quickly ordered all units to prepare for battle, as there were still some ants left to be dealt with. The battleship sailed in formation, ready for action as they approached the island, prepared to confront the remaining threat. On the eastern coast of the United States, within the walls of the Federal Bureau of Hunters, a video came to an end. The footage detailed the recent Jeju Island raid, showing the intensity and danger of the battle that had taken place. The room was silent as the video concluded, with the only sound being the soft hum of the equipment in the background. Michael Connor, the assistant director, turned to the director, Mr. Brennan, seeking his opinion. Mr. Brennan, who had been engrossed in the video, glanced at the clock and realized how late it was. It was well past 4 in the morning, but the events depicted in the video had kept him fully engaged. He knew why Michael had come to him at such an ungodly hour. The reason was clear. The conversation shifted to the topic of Sung Jinu, the South Korean hunter who had played a crucial role in the raid. Michael Connor expressed his thoughts, noting that a hunter with the ability to summon and command over 100 beasts was truly unique. He believed that such talent was too valuable to remain confined to a small country like South Korea. The potential of Sung Jinu was undeniable. Mr. Brennan agreed with Michael's assessment. The power and capabilities that Jinu demonstrated were extraordinary, and they both recognized that his talents would be a significant asset. Brennan inquired if there was more information about Jinu, to which Michael responded by presenting a file. The file contained details about an earlier incident at the Bureau, known as the Sung Il-hwan incident. Sung Il-hwan, who had been captured alive inside an A-rank gate on the East Coast by an A-rank hunter named James, was initially believed to be either a human or a magic beast. However, he had claimed to be a hunter from South Korea. This incident had left a mark on the Bureau's records, but what was more surprising was that Sung Il-hwan was actually Sung Jinu's father. This revelation presented a perfect opportunity for the Bureau. As of now, no other country had any significant knowledge of Sung Jinu's name or his potential. The discussion took a cautious turn as Mr. Brennan mentioned the delicate balance of international relations. The United States and South Korea had a long-standing alliance, and taking another S-rank hunter from South Korea would undoubtedly strain that relationship. The memory of what happened with Hwang Dong-soo still lingered, and they couldn't afford to repeat the same mistake. However, despite the risks, both Michael and Mr. Brennan acknowledged that Sung Jinu might be worth it. The power he wielded was something they couldn't ignore. The conversation ended with Michael expressing his determination to give this mission his best shot, fully aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Back in Jeju Island, the battle against the ants continued relentlessly. Jinu's made shadow soldiers were engaged in an ongoing assault, blasting the remaining ants with fiery spells. They set ablaze the unhatched eggs, ensuring that no new threats would emerge from them. As Jinu observed the destruction, he realized that he was gaining experience points even for destroying the unhatched ants. This unexpected bonus brought a small sense of satisfaction. Curious about his progress, Jinu opened his inventory and considered his options. His gaze fell upon the Demon Monarch's sword, a powerful weapon he had obtained as a reward for defeating the Demon Monarch in the Demon's Castle. The sword, glowing with a blue light and sparking electricity with each swing, had been stored away for some time. With his soldiers struggling to keep up, Jinu decided to put the sword to Zeus. once. He swung it with all his might, unleashing a storm of blue lightning that raged across the battlefield. The sword didn't possess the same destructive power or stun effect it had when wielded by the demon monarch, but it was more than enough to incinerate the eggs. Jeju couldn't help but feel a sense of delight as he wielded the powerful weapon. Although he preferred his daggers, the sword was too valuable to remain unused. After what felt like a considerable amount of time dealing with the eggs, Jeju finally heard the sound he had been waiting for, a notification indicating that he had leveled up. He had reached level 100. Satisfied with his progress, Jeju returned the demon monarch's sword to his inventory and made his way to the queen's den. There he found the massive corpse of the Ant King still lying in the same spot where it had fallen. Standing before the Ant King's lifeless body, Jeju felt a sense of unease. The creature seemed unusually troubled, even in death. Curious, Jeju stretched his hand forward and attempted to extract its shadow. As he did so, the surroundings flickered between light and darkness, as if a dying light bulb was struggling to stay on. For a brief moment, everything went dark, and Jeju found himself unable to feel anything. In that short period of darkness, Jeju wondered if the extraction had failed, but just as quickly as the darkness had come, it faded, and Jeju was back in the light. He heard a notification sound, signaling that the shadow extraction had been successful. Behind him, the Ant King's shadow began to take form, wreathed in dark energy, an embodiment of the creature's raw power. Jeju turned to face his new creation, the shadow of the Ant King. The air was thick with tension as Jeju stood at the edge, shadows swirling around him. He stared down at the formidable shadow soldier with a commanding presence, asserting his dominance over it. The Ant King's shadow, now under Jeju's control, was a powerful new addition to his ever-growing army. As Jeju examined the newly created shadow, the information about it appeared before him. He squinted to read the details floating above the shadow's head. It was at level 1, but what caught his attention was its rank, general rank. This was a new rank for Jeju, as he had only encountered standard, elite, knight, and elite knight ranks among his shadow soldiers so far. The discovery of this new rank led him to believe that this shadow was significantly stronger than any of the soldiers he had extracted before. Given the power the Ant King had possessed in life, Jeju wasn't surprised by this outcome. Satisfied with the extraction, he turned his attention to the next target, the Queen Ant. But just as Jeju was about to proceed, the shadow of the Ant King spoke, catching him off guard. The shadow, now kneeling on one knee with its head bowed, addressed Jeju as "my king" and made a request. The voice coming from behind him caused Jeju to freeze in place for a moment. The shadow then asked Jeju for a name. Jeju reflected on the unwavering loyalty his other shadow soldiers had always shown him and noticed that this new shadow exhibited the same trait. He couldn't help but wonder how the Ant King's shadow was able to speak. When he asked, the shadow simply responded that it had always possessed the ability to speak. Jeju pondered this revelation. The shadow's ability to speak seemed to be linked to the fact that it had been capable of communication before becoming one of his soldiers. However, this was not the case with his other soldiers such as Iron, Min Byung-yu, and Tusk, who had all lost their ability to speak after being turned into shadows. Jeju realized that the key difference between them and the Ant King's shadow might be their rank. Perhaps, he mused, the ability to speak would return to his other soldiers once they reached a higher rank. With this in mind, Jeju questioned the Shadow Ant further, asking if it truly wished to follow him despite the fact that he had been the one to kill it. The Shadow Ant's response was unexpected. It explained that it didn't consider itself to have been killed by Jeju, but rather reborn through his powers. The Shadow expressed immense happiness at this rebirth and vowed to follow Jeju for the rest of eternity, addressing him as both master and king. It then once again requested a name. Jeju realized that giving this shadow a simple name like Ant or Bug would be inadequate. He wanted to choose a name that would set this shadow apart from the other ants. A name suddenly came to Jeju's mind, Baru, the name of an author who had written a novel titled The Ants. It seemed fitting, and so he bestowed this name upon the shadow. Baru, the newly named shadow, expressed deep gratitude towards Jeju, acknowledging him as master. Jeju decided it was time to extract the Queen Ant's shadow. After successfully summoning Baru, the Ant King's shadow, his confidence was high. He approached the Queen's corpse with determination and performed the shadow extraction. With the command, "Arise," the Queen's shadow emerged. It was an enormous beast, identical to the Queen in life. Jeju was pleased with the success of the extraction, and was about to celebrate when he noticed something strange. As soon as the Queen's shadow was created, Jeju sensed a weakening in the connections between himself and his Shadow Ant soldiers. It was as if the lines binding them were covered in a fog, growing faint and unstable. This sudden change puzzled him. Jeju turned to Baru, seeking an explanation. He asked Baru why his bond with the Shadow Ants had weakened. Baru explained that the queen possessed an inherent power to rule over her colony. As long as the queen's shadow was alive, she retained the right to command the ants, even those who had been turned into Jenu's shadow soldiers. Jeju then asked Baru about the queen's mana levels, which seemed surprisingly low considering her rank. Baru explained that the queen's mana had primarily been used for reproduction when she was alive. Now that she no longer had a physical body, her mana had decreased, making her unsuitable for battle. After putting all the information together, Jeju realized that the queen's shadow wouldn't be as useful to him as he had hoped. He saw no reason to keep two commanders who could potentially conflict with each other. He gave the command to terminate the extraction, and the queen's shadow dissipated into smoke, vanishing into the air. Jeju then addressed his shadow soldiers, instructing them not to collect the essence stones from the ants. He reminded them that all the essence stones would be used to reconstruct Jeju Island's infrastructure and compensate for the damages caused by the raid. There was no need for them to keep any of the stones for themselves. Afterward, Jeju removed the gem from Baru's corpse. The essence stone was a beautiful pitch black jewel radiating power. Jeju decided that this one stone from Baru's corpse would be sufficient for his needs. His thoughts then turned to the remaining ants. Jeju knew that there were still many left on the island and wondered if he would be able to eliminate them with the troops he had available. As he pondered this, Baru spoke up, informing him that their enemies were struggling in the skies due to the lack of a leader. Without a leader, the ants were unable to maintain their formation and were scattering in confusion. Jeju asked Baru if he knew how many ants were left. Baru replied that there had been 8,700 ants before the attack, and approximately 4,000 had survived. Jeju was surprised, as he had thought he had taken down a significant number during the earlier battle, but there still seemed to be quite a few left. Finally, Jeju asked Baru if he could wipe out the remaining ants on his own. Baru, with unwavering loyalty, responded that he would follow Jenu's order without hesitation. In the midst of the ocean, the hunters aboard the battleships prepared for the oncoming threat. Jiangsu, the leader of the Night Guild, was the first to spot the danger, noticing that the ants were flying directly towards them. The battleship's artillery roared to life, firing at full capacity as the ants approached. The sky was filled with the sound of booming explosions. Mage hunters on board joined forces, launching devastating magical attacks that added to the chaos. The sky lit up with a series of bright flashes and explosions, creating an atmosphere of absolute mayhem. Despite the relentless assault, the ants continued their advance, heading northbound towards the Night Guild. Sun Cahoon, the leader of the Hunters Guild squad, quickly issued commands to his guild members, urging them to prepare for battle as the ants closed in. The Fame Guild hunters also received their orders, instructed to slaughter every ant in sight. The Fiend Guild hunters, led by their determination to reclaim their honor and glory, steeled themselves for the fight, knowing that a single ant was as strong as a B-rank hunter. They formed battle positions, aware that falling out of formation could mean certain death. Amidst the tension, Minsung, the A-rank hunter, trembled in fear. His anxiety was palpable, and another hunter nearby couldn't help but notice, thinking that despite his rank, Minsung was clearly out of his depth. The sky grew darker as the ants nearly reached the ships, their numbers filling the horizon. Juhi was struck with fear as she realized the ants had already reached the shores of Hyundai. She questioned whether they were strong enough to face such a powerful enemy. The ants, with their wings spread and mandibles ready, closed in rapidly, their speed leaving little time for the hunters to react. Sung Chiol noticed just how fast the ants were approaching. They were now only an arm's length away, ready to attack. But just as the ants were about to strike, a blue streak of light flashed through the sky. It moved with incredible speed, tearing through the ants in midair, leaving them destroyed in its wake. Juhi and Chiol were both stunned by the sight. Juhi wondered what could have caused such a powerful strike, while Chiol marveled at the speed of the attack, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The mysterious blue streak was none other than Baru, executing the command of his master Jeju with deadly precision. Efforts to exterminate the ants continued relentlessly for 2 days in the southern regions of South Korea. The hunters and soldiers worked tirelessly, determined to eradicate every last one of the deadly creatures that had caused so much devastation. Meanwhile, the coast of China was not spared from the ant invasion. The relentless insects had already made their way into Chinese waters, causing widespread alarm. The crew on board a Chinese ship could hardly believe the sight before them. The ants had flown all the way to China, and the crew had not been able to sleep for 2 days as they battled against the relentless swarm. As the second wave of ants approached, now within shooting range, the crew awaited the order to fire. However, before they could act, an unknown hunter on board the ship stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around. The hunter looked up at the sky, watching as the horde of ants drew closer. Despite the overwhelming numbers, he remained unfazed. With a determined expression, he unsheathed his swords and prepared for battle. The hunter clashed his swords together, unleashing a powerful energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the sky. The sheer force of his attack was devastating, causing explosions that that echoed through the air. The bodies of the ants, unable to withstand the hunter's might, were split in half by the shockwaves. Their remains dropped into the ocean below, a testament to the hunter's overwhelming power. With the threat neutralized, the hunter calmly sheathed his swords, his expression one of mild disappointment. The battle had been too easy for someone of his caliber. As he surveyed the aftermath, the hunter couldn't help but think of the ant-sung Jeju had battled against. Had that powerful creature still been alive, the hunter mused that the battle might have been more challenging, perhaps even enjoyable. But with the ants now defeated, there was little left to do. The hunter sighed, lamenting the lack of a worthy opponent, and watched as the waves of the ocean carried away the remnants of the once formidable swarm. In the Scavenger Guild of the United States, tension filled the air as Laura, a high-ranking member of the guild, contemplated the situation at hand. She was deep in thought about the connection between Hwang Dong-soo and Sung Ji-nu, two figures whose paths had crossed in a deadly incident. Laura suspected that Sung Ji-nu might have been involved in the death of Hwang Dong-soo's older brother, which could explain why Hwang Dong-soo was now seeking revenge. As Laura considered the implications of this, she turned her thoughts to Thomas Andre, the guild master of the Scavenger Guild. Thomas Andre, a man known for his formidable power and influence, had been looking forward to meeting Sung Ji-nu in person. However, Laura realized that with the current circumstances, this meeting might be more difficult to arrange. The potential for conflict between Hwang Dong-soo and Sung Ji-nu complicated matters further. Thomas Andre was not one to take threats lightly, especially when it concerned his guild. To him, Hwang Dong-soo was not just a member of the Scavenger Guild, he was considered the property of the guild, something that Thomas Andre would fiercely protect. The Scavenger Guild, in turn, was Thomas Andre's domain, and he would not tolerate anyone, not even the government of the United States, interfering with what he considered his. On the third night of the Jeju Island raid, soldiers, along with hunters from the Knights Guild, the representative guild in the Yeongnam region, arrived on Jeju Island. Their mission was to collect essence stones and stand by in case of another incident. Jong-soo, the guild master of the Knights Guild, shared a story from his past as he led the group. Jong-soo reminisced about a man who never had much luck. This man, determined to be the best at what he did, dreamed of becoming a gold medalist. He trained relentlessly, pushing himself to become stronger, even going on strict diets to compete in a lower weight division. He endured intense training sessions, and everything seemed to be in place for him to compete in the Olympics. This was his lifelong dream, and he had passed all the doping tests. The night before the competition, he had a good dream and was in top condition. However, fate had other plans. A manometer evaluation revealed that he had been awakened, and he was subsequently barred from competing in the Olympics. Jong-soo revealed that the man in his story was himself. Despite having to give up on his dream of competing in the Olympics, he found a new calling. He vowed to create the country's best guild, a goal he was still pursuing with unwavering determination. As they continued their mission, Jong-soo proudly displayed the top quality essence stones they had collected. These stones represented his dream of creating the best guild in the country. Another hunter made a comment about the possibility of embezzlement, but Jong-soo dismissed it, focusing on the task at hand. The group continued to sweep the area, ensuring it was free of mana. Jong-soo reassured the others that it was safe to relax, as they believed the area had been thoroughly cleared. However, as they moved forward, Jong-soo spotted an ant that had been hiding. With swift precision, he sliced it with his blade, eliminating the threat. Jong-soo acknowledged that while there might be a few stragglers, there was no need to worry too much. He and the Knights Guild were there to protect the area and ensure the safety of everyone involved. As Yunate glanced to the other side, his eyes widened in shock. He spotted something alarming and quickly alerted Jong-soo, the guildmaster of the Knights Guild. Jong-soo, sensing the urgency in Yunate's voice, turned to see what had caused such a reaction. The soldiers in the group also noticed the disturbance, and a sense of unease spread among them as they saw a figure emerging from the shadows. The figure was an unknown stranger, someone who should not have been on Jeju Island. Jong-soo immediately questioned the presence of this stranger, as the only people authorized to be on the island were the soldiers and agents from the association who had assigned the mission to them. The stranger, however, did not fit any of these descriptions. Jong-soo and the other hunters could not determine whether the figure was human or something else entirely. The stranger moved closer, and the hunters hesitated to open fire. Uncertain of what they were dealing with, the figure had glowing yellow eyes, sharp teeth, and wild black hair, giving him an otherworldly appearance. He spoke in a language that none of the hunters could understand, a language that sounded as though it belonged to beasts rather than humans. Jong-soo and the others were taken aback, unsure of how to respond. The situation grew even more tense when it became clear that the stranger was not alone. A simple snap of fingers sent a piercing sound through the air. Within seconds, Jong-soo and his guild members went limp and collapsed to the ground. The stranger was accompanied by an elderly elf with blue skin and long silver hair. The humanoid beast, who had initially emerged emerged from the shadows questioned the elf's actions. However, the elf calmly explained that there was no need to cause any further commotion, and that he had only put the hunters to sleep temporarily. The humanoid beast confirmed that he had checked for the presence of a particular power, and the elf, puzzled, wondered why someone was helping the humans. The humanoid beast speculated that no one could truly understand the motives behind such actions, and suggested that if the elf was curious, he could ask the individual in question himself. The beast remarked on the stench of rotting ants in the area, and imagined how that woman would have reacted if she had witnessed the scene. The elf, however, was not deterred by these thoughts. He stated that the hunt would proceed as scheduled, and that this situation did not change anything. The elderly elf then twirled his hand lightly, creating a black hole in midair, a gate just big enough for a single person to pass through. The humanoid beast mentioned that he believed one of them was present in South Korea, and suggested taking care of the issue before leaving. The elf, however, preferred to leave the matter to someone else, not wanting to get involved directly. He left the interpretation of his actions up to the humanoid beast, stating that the beast could think whatever he wanted. As the elf's voice trailed off, he disappeared through the gate, which closed behind him with a faint sound. The humanoid beast, now alone, muttered under his breath, calling the elf a coward. He looked down at the humans lying helplessly on the ground, knowing they would soon wake up. Deciding that there was no need to complicate matters further, the humanoid beast quietly retracted his hand and vanished through another gate, leaving the area as silently as he had appeared. After the humanoid beast vanished through the gate, the island returned to an eerie silence. The hunters from the Knights Guild remained unconscious, scattered across the ground, unaware of the strange encounter they had just survived. The night on Jeju Island grew darker, with only the distant sounds of waves crashing against the shore.